I had them on long before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them on long before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up through some bucks down. Todd told the valet pull the truck round. Push the line after we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for they prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all line before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dialed up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. Boarded that flight to Amsterdam. Well, my accountant of minus my family found out too and didn't like it. You're not in this alone. What Dale said and I thought he was biased. Then I got a Venmo that said copy the finest. Before my foolishness settled in. Recorded a whole tape before we got to Berlin. This close to giving up but now never again. Don't overlook the work and come expecting to win. In the end, my word, never put nothing over the squad. Got it right up under their nose and provide a facade. Off the cliff with broken wings, I'm aware of the odds. Enough faith for us all, I'm the one for the job. Most days, catching sun rays, baby, look like the front page. Overthinking what they might say, have it your way. Yeah, the biggest threat is something they never seen. Dial it up, patch me into the screen. I had them all line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up.
What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode in Lukman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media, on the most dangerous platform on social media, Black Power Media. Yes, y'all, I am tired. We have been busy. I don't know if you are feeling kind of the same way I've been feeling the past few days, but a little anxious. Yeah, been a lot of work, a lot of talking. And I'm really worn out. And I was like debating, should I have my Friday wine? I actually had my Friday glass of wine yesterday, because it was just that kind of a day. And I thought, I should have my glass of wine. I already ordered our dinner, and thought, I should have a glass of wine. But this is really, I need to keep all of this information straight. So I need to keep a straight head. So, yeah, I'm not gonna do that to y'all tonight. So I'm seeing you all talk about there's an audio glitch. Is there a problem with the audio? Let me know what's going on. I don't know what the dilly is, yo. Let me check and see if the audio is okay. Okay, is audio all right? Audio's great, cool, good. Whew. It's been a couple of days, y'all. And honestly, I'm not even going to complain because I got too much stuff open. I'm not going to complain because this is kind of what I think I'm on this earth to do. It's kind of this thing that me and Abdus believed that we were put together for, the creation of this platform. We always believed that we were put together so that we could do what we ended up doing together. And that's why we are together tonight. So, big up to the ancestors and the universe for putting me, and God and the spirits for putting me and Abdus together so we could create Lukman Nation to do this work that was important to both of us, but um, we were so much better at it together, and I learned so much from him, and a lot of that information has come in handy with this situation with Ukraine. So let's take a breath. We're all right. We're all, relatively sane at the moment, even though things are a little hectic. Because we got a little bit of stuff to talk about tonight. So before I get into it, I want to get into the housekeeping. If you are not a subscriber of Black Power Media on YouTube, you should take care of that right now. You should subscribe to Black Power Media. You can join Black Power Media as a subscriber for a monthly fee on, or we like to call it a monthly contribution, because the information you get here, you're not going to get anywhere else. And speaking of information you get here, yeah, I am a little bit all over the place because I'm unpacking everything. But today on Black Power Media, I feel like was like one of those bellwether days that I don't think any of us can keep up with if we did it all the time. But it was just one of those bellwether days that it was just perfect. So if you did not check out Riot Starter TV, first of all, the after party this morning, I woke up early enough to hang out with Jared uh and Cinque Brath, who was Ilumbe Brath's son. You got to check that out. That was great. I didn't hang out in the members only portion of that, but I know you all had a good time. Then at 11 o'clock, Riot Starter TV with Daruba Ben Wahad and Ajamu Baraka. I was at work on By Any Means Necessary. Great show today on By Any Means Necessary, by the way. You can check it out on Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all the places where all the podcasts are. Definitely check out our stuff. Really good. We had Margaret Kimberly on the live hour today. It was great. But Riot started TV at 11 o'clock with Daruba Ben Wahad and Ajamu Baraka. I have to go back and watch the first hour because I missed it because I was at work. But the second, the part that I got was I turned my YouTube Jazz channel on, moved to another tab so I wouldn't get distracted by the comments, and I just listened, and it was amazing. So you need to go, absolutely, definitely need to go check that out. A lot of organizing going on. I know Burn It Down with Kim Brown is later on tonight after me. Last Dope Intellectual, I believe, before me. Check them out. Just all kinds. Whew, we out here doing some work. And please understand that doing this, I mean, it is work. It's not, a lot of people just, sit down in their chair and turn on a camera and start talking. And I mean, I could do that, but the information we give is important. So we put a lot of effort into it. So really, really great. And forgive me if I got my schedule all off, but look here. Like I said, I literally just got out of it. I got off of an organizing meeting after I got off of work, after I had to call. So yeah, it's been that kind of day. It's been that kind of 2 days. But yeah, so you get all that. You get all that if you subscribe to Black Power Media. And you get even more if you become a patron of Black Power Media. You can do that on Patreon, patreon.com/Black Power Media, where you get some extra content and good stuff. You can also, if you are so inclined, as I've seen people do over the past couple of days, we appreciate stickies. We appreciate, new members in the chat as the shows are going on. Listen, we really, really appreciate your support here at Black Power Media. All right, then. Whew. let's get into this Ukraine stuff, because I know that for a lot of people, and I've seen this in some of the chats and some of the shows, there's a lot of people who feel like this is not an issue we need to be concerned about. And I have said, and I said it to make a point, that yes, a lot of people are like, oh, this is just white on white crime. Well, yeah, in a way that's true. But when we are talking about something like imperialism, which is what this is, we are seeing what imperialism looks like in real time. And this is important for us, I think, here in the beating heart of imperialism, as my as the host of the show that I co-host by any means necessary, Sean the Voice Blackman, says all the time. We here in the beating heart of imperialism don't get what it looks like. Like, imperialism is not just like a theory that Lenin came up with. Our people on the continent, our people in the Americas, in the global South, they have seen what imperialism looks like, how it looks, and how it affects their lives. I mean, since the beginning of this country, since the rise of this country's military might, certainly since the rise of the British Empire, who were the former imperialist power in the world. And now that the United States is the imperial power in the world, and has been for some time after World War, since World War I, I suppose, then our people who look like us, people in the global South, people on the continent, people in countries that didn't want capitalism but had resources that the capitalists wanted. Those people understood what imperialism really looks like. It is more than just a theory, and always has been. And I want to start this show by defining imperialism. This is a part of my monologue from today. Every day on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, I do a monologue. They give me they give me like 7 to 10 minutes to say whatever the heck I want at the top of the show every day, 5 days a week on By Any Means Necessary. And they let me get away with it for like 2 years now. So I haven't said anything that has gotten me in trouble. So I'm not going to stop saying the things I've been saying now, for sure. But I want to start by kind of defining imperialism. And yes, there is the definition that comes from V.I. Lenin. But I like what Thomas Sankara had to say about imperialism. He said that imperialism is a system of exploitation that occurs not only in the brutal form of those who come with guns to conquer territory. Imperialism often occurs in more subtle forms: alone, food aid, blackmail. We are fighting this system that allows a handful of men on earth to rule all of humanity. That's what Thomas Sankara said about imperialism. And I'm going to go with his definition, because I do think that a part of what is happening in Ukraine does fit that bill, but it also, I think, fits like the textbook definition or the Lenin definition of imperialism. But first, I want to say big ups and thank you so much to my girl Corinna Acrie Paez. Thank you so much, sis. Appreciate you. She said I was a standing rock, and she was. Tell me again how the USA cares about sovereignty. Whoo, man. Colonized people understand that imperialism is not just a concept that V.I. Lenin came up with. They see it in the way this country and its allies treat people like us who are colonized all of the time. So let me say this about what's been going on in Ukraine. Um, so people are saying that, Russia is acting as an imperialist force. Vladimir Putin is an imperialist and all this kind of stuff. Okay, I will say this. It's true. I think it's true that um Putin has wanted to exert some influence over the economic and political direction of countries in the region with Russia. I think that's true. Um, and he wanted to do that outside of the influence of the U.S., the EU, the European Union, and even China. There, even though Russia and China have recently made an agreement to support each other in practically everywhere there is possible for two countries to support each other. The idea, don't get it twisted, Russia and China are not like friends. They have an agreement of convenience because they are both opposed to US, EU, NATO dominance. That is why they came to the agreement that they came to. But I think that I don't think Putin wanting to have some influence over the countries in the region that were a part of the Soviet Union, that have more in common culturally, historically, you know, with Russia than they do with the European Union. And especially since um, the European Union is a part of the Western imperialist hegemony, of course, Putin is like, yeah, I want to have some influence into how some of these countries that are allies with Russia that are still in this region, I want to have some influence into their economics and their politics as allies, as I think every other country in the axis of domination, the US and the EU and all of their allies, don't they all do the same thing? So I don't how is it a weird terrible thing if Russia does it? That's not imperialism. Um and I'm not sitting here saying that I think Putin is whatever. Putin is not even he's not even like 20th on my list of reasons to pay any attention to what's going on in Ukraine, because Putin is a capitalist, let's be clear. Russia is not a socialist haven. Putin has flat out said that he at one time believed in uh, communism when he was a member of the KGB, but since he's left the organization, he's like, capitalism pays better, you know. So I mean, so it's not like I have any ideological affinity, solidarity with Vladimir Putin. What I will say is that I think that might be as far as any imperialist machinations that Russia has goes in this current conflict. Not talking about what Russia has done before, not talking about what they may do in the future. I'm talking about this conflict. Um, but I cannot say the same for the United States, the European Union, and I damn sure can't say the same for NATO. So I wanted to start this discussion with that disclaimer that me, Jacqueline Luqman, the socialist, is not sitting over here saying what I'm saying about what Russia is not doing and what Russia is doing, because I think Russia is the socialist utopia. Please, no, Russia is not a socialist country at all. Let's be clear on that. But let's also be clear on what's been going on in Russia since 2014, which is the immediate policy based uh, um, catalyst for what is going on right now. So And I got to break out my outline. I do have an outline because I got to keep this stuff straight. And also, this is everything that it's not even everything that I know. I think it's the most important high level kind of things that I know and that I have learned over the past day that I didn't know before. And I'm not even going to be able to tell you everything in this one show because, good Lord, it's a lot. We got to talk about NATO, but I feel like that's a big old conversation. It is a big conversation. And I might have to bring some friends in to talk about NATO, but we're going to get to a little bit of it tonight. But first, I want to talk about what happened in Ukraine in 2014 that you didn't hear on the media today, in the media, the corporate media today. You didn't hear in the weeks leading up to this, Russia's going to invade Ukraine narrative that was coming out. You didn't hear anything about the former president of Ukraine, the one who was democratically elected, and that person was Viktor Yanukovych, refused to sign what was called the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement with the European Union in 2014. Why is this piece of legislation important? Whole lot of reasons, but chief among them for the Ukrainians at the time was that in order for Ukraine to be able to enter into a relationship with the EU, which would have been like the precursor to them joining the EU almost, they would have had to transfer their financial markets and the way they do everything to the EU model. They were going to have to play by the EU's rules about everything because that's how imperialists be doing stuff. That's, when you enter a deal, an agreement with these people, for you, it's not a free nothing. They get to dictate the terms. Ukraine suffered a very bad economy, so they were desperate for some other investment. However, Russia was already the major foreign, if you want to call Russian a foreign investor, a foreign investor in Ukraine. So even though Ukraine was okay with going into the deal, and Russia actually didn't have a problem with a lot of the deal either. Russia just was opposed to the fact that the EU was going to require Ukraine to basically sever ties with Russia economically. And for Ukraine, that would have been a disaster. And even for Ukraine, even for Yanukovych, who was not anti-Russia, he was never anti-Russia. He wasn't necessarily pro-EU either. He was just looking for, some economic help for his country, what was the best thing for him to do. And even he realized that severing ties with Russia at that time would be a disaster. So at the last minute, he pretty much reneged. He pulled out of this deal with the EU. He's like, I have made the calculations, and it would be disastrous for us to cut ties with Russia in order to satisfy the EU to enter into this agreement with them. Because what if we sever our relationship with Russia, which is our largest foreign investor, who is going to make up the shortfall that we suffer from severing that agreement? And this comment from the Ukrainian prime minister at the time is very interesting. So the Ukrainian parliament was not happy about Yanukovych making this agreement, but the Ukrainian prime minister said, his name is Mykola Azarov, said to the Ukrainian parliament, what will be our compensation for the huge losses from losing the customs union market? What? I'm asking you. unfortunately, we did not receive a realistic answer to this question. What does that mean? See, Ukraine had been asking the EU, okay, fine, if we sever ties with Russia, which is our largest investor, how are you going to make up the shortfall? And the EU they just wouldn't answer the question. They never gave Ukraine an answer that satisfied them to the point where they felt comfortable enough to trust the EU to have Ukraine's back if Ukraine severed economic ties with Russia. So the president of Ukraine was like, nope, can't do that. Mm-mm. So, of course, the Ukrainian parliament, the lawmakers, they're not happy because they wanted more money. Some Ukrainians were not happy with the refusal to sign the agreement because they wanted an improvement in their economy, and they saw, investment from the EU, which is much bigger, has much more money and all this kind of stuff, as a positive thing. Some of them were mad, but not all, because Ukraine is about 1/3 ethnic Russian, right? So at least like a third of the people in Ukraine were like, okay, cool. So it's not like half the population of Ukraine was like up in arms because Ukraine didn't enter into this deal with the EU. Some people were, yes, but it was not a majority of the population of Ukraine. That's very important to keep in mind. What's also important to keep in mind was that, Russia was like, I mean, I would have, Putin, since everybody wants to make Putin the devil here, Putin was like, I really didn't care if Ukraine did everything else that the EU wanted. He really did not oppose anything else in that deal except for that. Because Russia understood, let me tell you why, because Russia understood that if the EU didn't make up Russia's shortfalls for Ukraine, then Ukraine wasn't going to be EU's problem. Ukraine was going to be Russia's problem. Why? Because Ukraine is right on the border of Russia. Come on, man. So that's the backdrop for that. So now we come to the protests that you hear a lot about in Ukraine, where this is where the conversation about Ukraine in media here starts. And I got to give Mr. Man a tissue to placate him so he can leave me alone so I can do this show. So you hear on corporate media all this stuff about, the Maidan revolution in Ukraine, where all of the tens of thousands of Ukrainians took to Maidan Square and protested the government in Ukraine. That is the first conversation you hear about what happened in Ukraine from most Western media. Here are some things they don't tell you about the Maidan uprising. And yup, it's screen sharing time. So, and look, this is a lot of documents. I'm not going to be able to drop these links into the chat for you while we go along, but I will add them to the description of the video at the end of the show. So you'll have them, just not like right this very moment, because it's just too much stuff. All right, so I understand. Let me say right at the outset, some of these sources are straight garbage. Some of these sources are like not clear on a whole lot of the politics of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism. Jacobin is one of those really iffy. Oh, I can't Jacobin most of the time. However, this article is actually pretty good. This is from 2022. This is just recent. And they talk about how this whole lead up to the what's going on now started with these protests, and they make it clear that these are far right led. This was a far right led revolution. That is something you do not ever hear about the Maidan protests or the Euro Maidan protests in Ukraine. That it was a far right operation, if not from the beginning, it was absolutely co-opted by the far right very, very quickly. So let's get into this. I got my highlights in here. So I hope they show up. I always wonder if my highlights are going to show up, because sometimes they do, and sometimes so I get surprised and when they do. So yes, it's true that there was, demonstrators were fed up with nepotism and corruption, and there's nepotism and corruption in every society. This is why I don't like. This is why Jacobin gets on my nerves, because they write articles and they say stuff about foreign governments as if the things that happen in foreign governments don't happen in this government, and honestly don't happen in every damn government. And just there's nepotism and corruption in every government, except for maybe the one in heaven, if that's what you believe. And I guess people would argue about that. All governments lie. I believe I.F. Stone when he said that. I believe so. Yeah, this is just crazy. So yeah, there were protests about they don't mention a whole lot about the free trade agreement, but they do mention it, but they make a big deal about, nepotism and corruption. Excuse me. January 6th and February, they're cute little titles. That's nice. Let me go down. So now they're talking about the protest. The protest in Ukraine in February of 2014 initially it was pretty small. And even folks inside the Washington think tank ecosystem recognized that there were questions about the way that protest grew and escalated into quite literally a massacre, even if they were like very supportive of the U.S. So they point out in this article how the National Endowment for Democracy, we're going to talk about them in a minute, and the U.S. Agency for Development, USAID, whose Kiev headquarters, Kiev is the capital of Ukraine, is in the same compound, were at the time in the same compound as the U.S. Embassy, which, yeah. So this scholar, Irina Solonenko from Ukraine, writes, one can argue that without the external support of agencies like the National Endowment for Democracy and U.S. aid, which has been the major force of funding for Ukrainian civil society since independence, Ukrainian civil society would not have become what it is now. So understand what this means. The United States, ever since Ukraine's independence, 1991, I think it was, whatever year that was in the 90s, the United States has been in the Ukraine pumping money into the Ukrainian government, propping them up. So maybe could it be the Ukrainian people who protested weren't necessarily angry about corruption and nepotism in the Ukrainian government? They were really angry about US interference in the Ukrainian government that they knew about for a long time. Just a question I thought I'd throw out there. And they even cite here in Jacobin that the 2004 Orange Revolution was actually that the U.S. absolutely did fund in the Ukraine is an example of this. So there is a track record of the U.S. funding and fomenting revolutions in Ukraine before 2014. Okay. So they do, here's where they talk about the EU deal. They say US officials were unhappy about it. Yes, they were, because Ukraine was supposed to take that deal with the EU so that the EU members and the US could profit from the EU's access to Ukraine and use Ukraine to scuttle Putin's plans for having any influence over the economic and political strategies or plans of countries in the region that may have still been allied with Russia. That was always Ukraine's role, to be used against Russia by the U.S. and the EU. But when Viktor Yanukovych did not sign that deal with the EU, the U.S. said that motherfucker has to go because he messing up our shit. That's Victoria Nuland actually said in one call later on, when she's literally picking the coup government in Ukraine, fuck the EU, because the EU would not pressure Yanukovych to sit. Okay, so U.S. pissed off that Ukraine didn't sign the deal. The National Endowment for Democracy's president said that the opportunities for Yanukovych and his outreach, asking for help from the EU are considerable, and there are important ways Washington could help. But now that deal is not signed. None of that. All that's gone. Journalist Mark Ames discovered the organization, the New Citizen, this fascist organization in Ukraine, received hundreds of thousands of dollars from U.S. democracy promotion initiatives. So this is what the National Endowment for Democracy does. That's what they do. They foment coups. That is what they do. They fund. Let's get into this. So I'm gonna scroll down. Let me see. What else do I have in here? Well, all this kind of stuff. Okay, I don't have anything else in here. I'm gonna stop sharing this one. Okay, Jacobin was on the right track. So there's a protest, and we do have to. He gonna play with his ball that talks and lights up when he touches it now, because he's trifling and he's jealous and he does these things. So if you want to know what the National Endowment for Democracy is, let's talk about that. This is from FAIR, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, a great resource where they explain what the National Endowment for Democracy is. Let me increase this so you can really see it. The NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, is a key organization in the network of American soft power. This is the pre-coup, right? The NED provides funding for the pre-coup. They'll co-opt a protest. They will try to, funnel money into opposition organizations who are against governments that they want to get rid of. Yeah, I know, Brewski. That's right. So they poured $170 million a year into organizations dedicated to defending or installing U.S.-friendly regimes around the world. $170 million a year. And it's probably more now. David Ignatius, who wrote for the Washington Post, said that the organization does in public what the CIA, he said, used to do, but still does in private. The NED targets governments who oppose U.S. military and economic policy, stirring up anti-government opposition. So when you understand that's what the NED is, what they do, and their office is physically in the same compound with USAID and the U.S. Embassy in Kiev in Ukraine, when that small group of people start to protest Yanukovych not signing the EU deal, the NED sees an opportunity. They were already there. They were already funding right-wing organizations, but they were anti-Russian. The only thing the U.S. government cared about was that those organizations were anti-Russian. So they knew they were fascist, and they knew they were neo-Nazis, but as long as they were anti-Russian, they were fine. They gave them money. Then all of a sudden, this small protest against Yanukovych not signing the EU deal becomes the Maidan massacre. So let me stop sharing this. Yes, like I said, I'm going to provide you links to all of this stuff. Going to be in the description to the video later on. The Maidan massacre, as people like to talk about it here in the U.S. and corporate media, they always say that it was pro-Russian forces that shot and killed a bunch of people. No. No. So where is this one? Oh, here we go. This is one of my favorite sources. I love Liberation School from the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This article is from 2018 from Sam Shipman, where he talks about the roots of fascism in Ukraine, and he goes into the history of Nazi collaboration. Yes, there is a history of some Ukrainians collaborating with the original Nazis. So there has always been a neo-Nazi element in Ukraine. They just got bigger because of money from the U.S. through the National Endowment, what the heck is this organization called? Yeah, National Endowment for Democracy. All the alphabet soup agencies that destroy other countries' sovereignty. It's hard to keep them straight. So here he talks about the Euromaidan coup that was carried out by multiple fascist organizations and was propped up and propagated by the U.S. government. Now, the initial protest was completely legitimate. Few Ukrainian people who were like, Yanukovych, you clown, you didn't sign this agreement, and now we're still going to be in such dire economic straits. But the U.S. and the NED sees that protest, and they're like, hey, now we can deploy all these anti-Russian people into the streets, and we can turn this into an opportunity where we can create this situation where we're saying, look at all these Ukrainians who are angry at Russia, who are angry at their government for continuing to kowtow to Russia in not signing the deal with the EU. That's exactly what they did. This coup or this protest turns into a massacre. And this article goes into detail about how the protest kind of unfolded. A Ukrainian minority began protesting in the capital. Maidan is literally the Ukrainian word for square. So it was just, people protesting in the square. There were three tensions behind the demonstrations: to remove the democratically elected president, Yanukovych, ignoring the constitutional process. Now, remember, the original protest, small, organic, not a lot of people. They wanted to get rid of Yanukovych. To help bring attention to the possibility of Ukraine joining the EU through signing that deal with the EU, and to change the constitution to restore it to as it was between 2004 and 2010. The first demonstrations actually happened in 2012, but didn't happen. They weren't big enough for anybody to care. Then in 2014, when the second demonstrations happened, then the NED deploys its agents. And its agents were organizations like Svoboda, or Freedom, a right-wing organization, and Right Sector, a right-wing organization, that basically seized control, took over the demonstrations. The small group of people were overwhelmed with all of these right-wing fascists who were armed. He gives some information on Svoboda that is important. Anti-communist. This is all that. This is the only part the United States cared about, that they were anti-communist. They don't care about the neo-Nazi part of it. The fact that Russian, Jewish, and other international organizations denounced Svoboda as a fascist organization. Svoboda took a leadership role in the takeover of the demonstrations. And what does that mean? That means that the fascists ended up shooting and killing 17 people. They actually deployed snipers on the buildings around the square. That the government of Ukraine was like, what the fuck is going on? But what did the U.S. say? The U.S. said that those snipers were pro-Russian separatists who killed protesters and police in Ukraine, but it was not. It was the NED-funded right-wing fascist. Okay, he talks about that too. Talks more about the paramilitary organizations, the rights sector, all of that kind of good stuff. All right, cool. You're going to get that link too. Very good article. Let me go back over here to the screen and check on the chat to make sure y'all are cool. Are we good? We following along? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Am I y'all good? Because we ain't done. So the Maidan protests turn into a fascist massacre. And this is a very interesting article that I just found today that I wanted to make sure that I shared. I honestly, I have to tell you the truth. I have not read all of it yet, but the parts that I did read, which I know that can get you in trouble because there could be something in here that's like totally imperialist. But MR Online is a solid, for me. It's been a pretty solid anti-imperialist source. So this article is from 2021, and there were actually trials and investigations, or investigations and trials, into the massacre in Maidan Square. And this part right here, in the first paragraph of this article, the author, who is Ivan Kachanovsky, yes, Kachanovsky of the Jordan Russian Center, says in the very first paragraph, this massacre of protesters, I keep forgetting to magnify this so you can read along with me. This massacre of protesters and police during the Euromaidan mass protests on February 20, 2014 not only constituted a major crime and human rights violation, but also contributed to a cascading series of events. These included the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. That was the next thing that happened. The start of the civil war in Donbas. That was the second thing that happened. You don't hear about the civil war in Donbas that started after the coup, that started after the fascist protests, because in order for the U.S. media to talk about the civil war in Donbas that started in 2014, they'd have to talk about the fact that the protests were taken over by fascists that were funded by the U.S. All right. So the civil war in Donbas, and then Russian military interventions in Crimea and Donbas, the Russian annexation of Crimea, and ultimately major and protracted conflicts between Ukraine and Russia on the one hand, and then Russia and the West on the other. All right. So let's scroll down. Let me see what else I highlighted here, because there's a lot. There's a lot of information about trials and investigations that the author goes into a lot of great detail about. I do remember this video coming out when this happened, when the protests happened and the massacre happened, about this. There was this woman who was supposed to be a medic, and it reminds me of that damn, Syria white helmets thing. But she was supposed to be a medic, and her video was going all over social media. How she tweeted saying that she was dying because she was on an ambulance or going to an ambulance. She had blood on her clothes, and she actually testified at the trial that she was wounded from the direct direction of the Hotel Ukraine. It's where the so-called pro-Russian forces were supposed to have been stationed, right? However, she actually admitted in an interview with the Ukrainian journalist that she was not wounded at all. She told him that her wounding was staged by the Maidan self-defense leadership funded by the NED, and that she misrepresented wounds from a recent surgery as, Syria, white hats. Yes, man. Let's see. He talks about the members and commanders from government, snipers and units and all this kind of stuff testifying. The government investigated and said that the Yanukovych government, the democratically elected president, who, remember, if you remember, the U.S. said that the government of Ukraine cracked down on the protesters with brutal force and killed a bunch of people. That's what they said. The government had said that the Yanukovych government could only be held responsible for the death of one protester. Then two other demonstrators testified, that they were shot from a Maidan-controlled video. But despite overwhelming evidence, the investigation ultimately denied that there were snipers in the Maidan-controlled buildings. And 8 years later, the author points out that nobody was convicted or arrested for the Maidan massacre. Do you know why? Because everyone who committed the massacre were members of the NED-funded, U.S.-backed fascist coup force. So after the massacre, then the coup happens. Yanukovych literally flees Ukraine. And then there's something else that is never talked about in this series of events. Because we've talked about the coup several times, right? At this point, the U.S. has unleashed its fascist neo-Nazi forces, has selected the next president. Victoria Nuland and a couple other people are caught on tape literally selecting people to go in the coup government. That tape is released. That was all over the place. So then all of these neo-Nazi forces are now absorbed into the government. There are pictures of John McCain and Victoria Nuland literally posing on stage and taking cookies to, respectively. Nuland was the one who took the cookies to the fascists, to the neo-Nazis in Ukraine that they used to foment the coup. And now those people are in the government of the Ukraine. So let's talk about the annexation of Crimea, I think. No, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the Civil War. Yeah, because that was the next thing. The coup happens, and then the Civil War happens. And I know a lot of you are like, what Civil War? What you talking about? Because you're not going to hear about any Civil War that happened in Ukraine, in this country. Because like I said, in order to talk about the Civil War, you have to talk about what caused the Civil War. And what caused the Civil War was the coup, was the fascists being unleashed to topple the democratically elected government, and then those fascists who, remember, are anti-communists, they are anti-Russian, so they hate everyone in Ukraine who is Russian speaking, who is ethnic Russian. That's where the Civil War comes from. So this is the global conflict tracker. And let me tell you what this is. This is a one of those, U.S. funded and backed organizations that produces this thing. Where are you? What is the organization? You can find it. You can find the organization when you see the link. But look, this is not a leftist source here. This isn't, a radical source, which is actually why this is an important source to use, because while the U.S. government politicians and the politicians in the West that are the allies of the U.S., I'm sure, and the media don't talk about the civil war in Ukraine, these people do. Since 2014, more than 50,000 people have been killed in the civil war in Ukraine. 1.5 million internally displaced, and there are 280 miles of front line. When I started doing research for this show yesterday, that number was 14,000. Now, does the number of casualties was 14,000. So one of two things are possible with the number, with an increase that big. One of two things are possible, and because of the source, I think it's the second. Number one could be that, or actually I will say first, number one, it could be they may not have paid much attention to this and have not updated the numbers for a while since they last reported, whenever that was. And there may have been a bunch of additional casualties that they didn't post, right? Or, and this is what I actually think is more likely, because Russia finally responded to everything that was done in Ukraine, which was an aggression toward Russia. They inflated these numbers to make it seem like Russia, in their invasion, killed an additional, 35,000 people. There could be a third option, but I'm cynical. I think it's interesting that there is a U.S. government-funded website or supported website that is actually tracking this information on a civil war that the U.S. media does not admit ever happened. But I don't think for 1 second that they don't have political motives for. Okay, you know what I'm saying? So, all right. So yes, that's the civil war in the Ukraine that nobody is ever going to tell you about, that I had to tell you about here. Because that civil war was not limited to one particular region. The civil war spread throughout the Crimean region and the Donbas region. So now let's talk about the annexation of Crimea, which people they just talk about, Russia annexed Crimea as if, Russia just walked in one day and said, I'm just taking it. Putin just woke up one day and was like, fuck it, I'm just going to send the troops into Crimea, and that's just what I'm going to do. Remember, the fascists had started killing people in ethnic Russian regions in Ukraine. So yes, Putin does send Russian troops in to respond to that, but he doesn't all out go in and just, no, it was very limited, I guess. And I hate to use that word in any kind of war scenario. All right, so let's talk about Crimea for a minute. What you are never ever going to be told about Russia annexing Crimea. This is from a TASS news agency. Of course, TASS is major Russian news agency. This is from August of last year. The West only encourages Kiev's neo-Nazi attitude through Crimean Platform. And Lavrov is the Russian foreign minister who pointed out that the West moved to support the Kiev coup in 2014 and reproach Moscow was deplorable. And I'll tell you why. They explain why. Oh, what happened to my article? What happened to the rest of my article? What they do? Oh, here it is. Let's talk about this annexation of Crimea, because what really happened was that after the coup in 2014, in the Crimea region, they held a referendum. The Crimea region is majority ethnic Russian. Those people mostly speak Russian. They are Russian, you know. So after the coup in 2014, the authorities in Crimea and the city of Sevastopol held a referendum on, look at that, reuniting with Russia. They voted. The people in Crimea voted to reunite with Russia. Most voters in the region, 96.7% in Crimea and 95.6% in the city of Sevastopol, voted to reunite with Russia. Voter turnout, because people are like, oh, well, 10 Russian people voted. Nope, voter turnout was over 80%. We don't even know what that looks like in the U.S. We don't know what it looks like to have 80% of people turn out and vote for shit. On March 18th, 2014, Vladimir Putin signed the treaty that the people of Crimea voted for on Crimea's reunification with Russia, which was ratified by Russia's Federal Assembly, their parliament, on March 21st. However, Kiev, and at this point, anytime any article says Kiev, you might as well say Washington, because at this point, the coup has happened. Washington's president is now in office well, he's not in control. Washington, their puppet, is in the Ukrainian government, the president of Ukraine. So Kiev refuses to recognize Crimea as part of Russia, even though the people voted. They voted. I thought voting was supposed to be the thing we do, y'all. I thought that's how we get the things we. What you mean? The vote don't count to the United States? Really? Let me stop being petty, because not only did Kiev not recognize the referendum and the vote, but Barack Obama did not either. And he made comments. He was literally like, nah. He said, oh, that's why I had this up. So I had up, here's Obama's actual quote. He said, the Crimean referendum, which violates the Ukrainian constitution, they just violated the Ukrainian constitution by the coup, and occurred under duress of Russian military intervention. Russian troops were in these regions because fascists were killing Crimean people in the civil war that the coup started. would not be recognized by the United States and the international community. So that's the context for the annexation of Crimea. And the same thing happened in Donbas. The Donbas region, mostly, I think, ethnically. Oh, let me block these bots. Sorry about that, y'all. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the Donbas region, ethnically Russian, also targets of the civil war started by the fascists, armed and unleashed by the U.S. So yes, that is why Russia went into, one of the reasons why Russia went into Donbas. Okay, so that's that. So that's everything that I think is really, really high level important for you to know, that you're not hearing, that I know you have not heard, on the situation in Ukraine, what led up to the situation in Ukraine, from any of the coverage on any of the mainstream corporate media outlets, and a lot of the independent outlets also, because Vox News put out some garbage. A couple other so-called independent Democracy Now! And shit. You know, these are the missing pieces to this whole narrative that takes this whole thing about, oh, Russia just, Putin just woke up this morning and decided, I am going to invade Donbas. Yes, I am. No. So let's talk about, I think, the imperialism part. Because why is the U.S. doing all this? Why? What for? Other than other than the U.S. is an empire that is failing, it's crumbling, and it is fighting with all its might to maintain its control and its power in a world that is no longer unipolar. The world is becoming multipolar. Countries are determining for themselves their own spheres of influence, and they ain't taking the U.S. as shit no more. And the U.S. is just like a rat that has been cornered. It's fighting for its life. So that's okay. That's one reason. But there are some material reasons, and of course, you've heard about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the natural gas that Russia provides to Germany. People have been saying that, oh, Germany canceled the pipeline. That's not true. Germany has not canceled the pipeline because it doesn't make sense for Germany to cancel the pipeline in favor of getting liquefied gas shipped by container from Texas. What Germany said is, we're going to halt the pipeline until this bullshit dies down and somebody decides, okay, let's talk this out like adults. That's what Germany did. So Nord Stream 2 is not canceled. The US is not happy about that, but it is on hold, maybe indefinitely, but we'll see. But I found this interesting. The fact that, hi, mister. Hey, bud. Let me let you say hi to the peoples. There you go. You say hi to the people, Brewski. He's looking at me like, Heifer, we got our Chinese food and it's time for our movie. You better wrap this up. Acting just like his daddy, dog. But I found this really interesting. If you want to talk about like material resources that are at play other than natural gas, which is a big deal. Did you know that Russia is, let's see, did I highlight it? Did I highlight it in here? Yes, I didn't highlight it. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna. Russia is a major producer of oil and natural gas. We just talked about that. And let me see if I can, there you go. Oh, Lord, what did I just do? Now I have to find my word wheat again. But I have to spell it right, don't I, y'all? There you go. Russia is a major producer of oil and natural gas. And the geopolitical conflict has sent prices of both sharply higher in recent weeks. It is also the world's largest wheat exporter and is a major food supplier to Europe. Did you know that? I did not know that until I just learned this today. Do you want to know who the second largest wheat supplier or wheat exporter in the world is? It is the United States. So here you have an empire that is already willing to, as our guest Stephen Gowans said yesterday, or I think maybe it might have been Ben Becker today, said that the U.S. is willing to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian for dominance. They're willing to do that over natural gas and oil, definitely, but they don't want to be number two in wheat exporting either. Yeah. So wheat, literally feeding people. The US is willing to sacrifice ethnic Russians to the fascists they armed so that it can be the world's largest producer of wheat. Oh, Lord Jesus. So those are some of the things that I know that have not been talked about in regard to this conflict. But here's something I want to make very clear. And it is something that's kind of pissed me off about the way people have been interacting with this whole thing. And of course, I don't expect everybody to understand that NATO is the military arm of the white supremacist pan-European. Oh, sorry. I'm increasing the wrong thing. I'm supposed to be increasing the magnification on the article. I understand that not everybody is going to understand that NATO is the military arm of the pan-European white supremacist project of Western imperialism. I get that people don't understand that, but that's why we're going to do another show, and we're going to talk about NATO, what it is, where it started, how it started, when, why, and how come they don't stay in the North, and how come they've been fucking with people and countries all in the global South, all on the continent. I get that people don't understand that, but this is where I go back to what I said at the top of the show. People on the continent, in the global South, in Haiti, in the Americas, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Libya, Syria, understand NATO's role because they have all been in the crosshairs of NATO's guns. And NATO is the big gun of the US and Western hegemony. And really what I could have done was just sat here and read y'all like 5 Black Agenda Report articles for an hour. But, I really just want you to read, and support these outlets that do provide a lot of information that you are not getting by sitting there and watching the propaganda arm of the US imperialist, white supremacist, patriarchal government. So our people around the world, on the continent, global South, they understand what imperialism is because they have been the victims of US imperialism. And before AFRICOM was even funded, before it was even formed and deployed all over the continent, it was NATO that was destroying Libya. It was NATO that was sending troops into African nations, supposedly on peacekeeping missions, but really carrying out pacification missions for the empire to secure that oil, to secure those diamond mines and the coltan mines and the uranium for France. Fuck France. You want to know one reason why I don't have a beef with Russia? Just kind of off the little bit of an aside, because Russian troops, I think, are in Mali. It's either troops or mercenaries. But Russian forces were in Mali helping Mali kick France out. Fuck France. So before there was an AFRICOM, the pacification and the control of the resources on the continent was done by NATO. This is a great article. I love this graphic by Jibo Sobukwe. These are just some dope people, and this just some dope people with some serious commitment to anti-imperialism. Because while everybody is up in arms about what's going on in Ukraine, and I'm not diminishing the threat to their lives that these people in Ukraine have been facing for 8 years. I'm not talking about just what happened yesterday. I'm talking about what happened in 2014. There's been a civil war. These people have been suffering for 8 years. I didn't see anybody sharing any pictures of folks holding candlelight vigils for the people who were the victims of the civil war in Ukraine in that 8-year period of time. And you know what else I haven't seen? I ain't seen nobody posting any pictures about solidarity, candlelight vigils, pray for the people of any of these countries on the continent that AFRICOM, the U.S., NATO, and all of their murderous, lying, thieving agents, emissaries, operatives have been repressing, oppressing, and murdering our people. I haven't seen anybody talk about, being angry about all the French military bases in Africa. France is the height of culture for some of y'all folks. Excuse me. Woo. Not only that, not only have I not heard people or seen people concerned in any way about the plight of colonized people. All those black and brown and anti-imperialist and socialist and communist people, the El Salvadorans and the Venezuelans and the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, the Chileans, all the people who are struggling for the right to self-determination of their people outside of the same influence from the U.S., the EU, and NATO that Putin didn't want to fuck with, don't want nothing to do with. No, nobody is holding candlelight vigil. I don't see anybody on my timeline holding candlelight visions for the sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuela. I haven't seen anybody on my timeline holding a candlelight vigil for the 60-year blockade against Cuba. Nobody's been holding a candlelight vigil for, the sanctions against Iran and how those sanctions affect the people, women, children, boys, girls, making it difficult for people to receive food, medicine, supplies. It's great that people are all of a sudden interested in talking about war, but it is very interesting that most of those people are interested only in talking about how how Putin is the bad guy and he must be stopped, as if this is some kind of like personal pastime for Vladimir Putin. No. Putin's actions yesterday were a response to everything I just told you. And how many years has it been since World War II? Everything that happened after World War II up to 2014. Bretton Woods, the creation of the IMF, the creation of NATO, the expansion of NATO. And it's not, and I'm not saying this because, you know, I think Russia is like some great hero of black liberation or the revolution, although, as I often point out, Russia has been supportive of African liberation. There's a, I don't even need to explain that. You know that's true. Just last week, I talked about Patrice Lumumba University in Russia right now. But Russia is anti-imperialist. Guess what? I am too. That's all. Whatever stuff inside Russia, they have to deal with their economic problems. They don't like Putin. They got to deal with that dude. He's a corrupt oligarch. They got to deal with that dude. Putin is anti-imperialist. I'm anti-imperialist. And I'm not anti-imperialist because Putin is. I just am. I just happen to realize he and I are on the same side of this imperialism equation. We're on the right side of the barricade, as Kalanji would say. It doesn't mean we ace boon coon. No. But as long as I am an anti-imperialist, I also understand that Russia is responding to imperialism. And I don't see this as just a Putin is an evil dictator monster situation, because I also understand that there are people on the continent, in Haiti, in Cuba, in the global south, in Iran, in North Korea, who are fighting the same thing, the exact same thing: US, EU, NATO domination. That is the center mass of the conflict. It's not Putin. No, the center mass of this conflict is the harm to our people that the neoliberal project has caused, because it has expanded to AFRICOM and PacificCom and SouthCom. There's a struggle going on in the Philippines right now that I really need to dig into, that holds over from the Marcos days. And the Marcos regime was a US puppet regime. I mean, this conflict with Ukraine, excuse me, it is not a Putin bad, Biden good. That sounds stupid even saying it. Trying to No, this is a US imperialism is bad all of the time, regardless of who is on the other side of the US imperialist gun. That is it. So while people, you know, we have people's attention, since folks want to talk about war so much and war is bad, and y'all praying for the white people over in Crimea and Donbas, and yes, those people need to be left alone. But while y'all got candles and prayers and, oh, we need to end war, when the white people are in the crosshairs, let's talk about the colonized people of the world who have been in the crosshairs of Western hegemony, colonialism, neocolonialism, now US, EU, NATO imperialism and domination for how many years? Let's talk about them, because if people had paid attention when it was done to those brown folks, we might not be having this discussion. I might be talking about a recipe right about now, but no, because we know that Black and brown lives don't matter to this. That's a slogan that we should stop saying. We know this because we've seen what imperialism has done to our people. Yeah. Um all right. So I think that was pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. I'm looking at all my tabs and I'm seeing if I covered everything. I don't know. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Nwadi, what's going on? AFRICOM and SOUTHCOM, we can't have peace with Western institutions like that. That this is the thing. This is not. I'm not. Don't tell me you are against war, but you make the conversation about war about one person, an individual that the U.S. government told you not to like. Don't do that. No. No, either you are anti-imperialist and you understand that we are talking about a global system where NATO is literally the tip of the spear with AFRICOM and SOUTHCOM and PACIFICOM and all of these other commands around the world that the US is installing. We understand that we're talking about a system, an institution of imperialism, not one person. No, when you make it personal, then you only focus on the person. You don't pay any attention to any of the other tentacles of the system that operate in tandem. They operate together. There is no part of this system that is disconnected. The NED is important to what NATO does, is important to how AFRICOM operates, is important to how SOUTHCOM operates, is important to how the pigs operate in our communities right now. So let me go. Let me see. Let me go up because I know y'all been. It's been a minute. So let me go. Let me go up and see what y'all have had to say. And I'm telling you, I'm gonna completely ignore the unserious, unintellectual stuff. I'm tired. We don't have time. It's late in the day. We don't have time for that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Yes, Brewski is now snoring very loudly over here because he knows he's not gonna get any food until I stop. So, he's just waiting me out. Let me see. What did y'all have to say? Let's see. Normandy Murphy said you laughed at the orange Cheeto when he wanted to back off NATO. A broken clock is correct at least twice a day. Just say, I mean, it was weird how Trump actually talked about NATO in a way that only Trump would. Like, why are we paying them so much money? That's ridiculous. But I mean, he's the only politician, I think, who talked about NATO in a way in which the context was, why are we still fucking with NATO? Like, why does NATO even still exist? That's our whole point. But not for the reasons Trump says. Our entire point is NATO is the problem, not Putin. The US and imperialism and capitalism, that's the problem, not Putin. He did say the quiet parts out loud. Let's see. There was something I wanted to. Oh. I think this is going to be the last word on my last word on this for tonight. This went by fast. Was it just me? Did it go by way faster than? Because I was like, I look up and it's like, oh dang, I just started talking shit. So it is wild to me how many people are, when you tell them about the US arming and legitimizing neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They completely dismiss that and they automatically go to Putin bad. Putin bad man, must be stopped. If you want to know how everyday German citizens could ever allow and accept what the Nazis were doing and ultimately did, look at the people. Some of them in your family, a lot of them on your social media timelines, a lot of folks that you work with. Look at the people who are ignoring the fact, and they are facts, that the U.S. armed and legitimized neo-Nazis in Ukraine, put them in the government, put them in the National Guard, the police force, and the army, and unleashed those people not just to overthrow the government, but did nothing, stood back while they started an ethnic cleansing civil war in Ukraine. If you want to know how everyday Germans who were allegedly good people could allow the Nazis to come to power and do what they did, you're watching it right now. So I understand that for many people, believing that this government would do such a thing is just a bridge too far. But I think that people are more committed to anti-communism, which is why they go to the Putin evil thing. Although they don't know that Putin is not a communist, neither is Russia. But the U.S. keeps saying they are. But really, the focus for the U.S. is also China, but that's another discussion. But it is interesting that people in this country are more committed to anti-communism, the idea of anti-communism. And because people are refusing to believe the facts about the fascists in Ukraine, and are more committed to anti-communism, proves to me that people never knew what communism is, still don't, and don't give a shit what communism actually is. The fact that this shows that people are more committed to anti-communism than they are to human rights. Because what is stopping neo-Nazis from ethnically cleansing people? What is that other than ensuring people's right to live, human rights? And these folks in this country are acting just like the U.S. government that didn't care. And let me not say U.S. government, people in the U.S. government who made the conscious decision to give neo-Nazis money so they could do exactly what they have been doing this past couple of weeks. These folks that you and I know are acting just like those folks. So if you believe that something like a Nazi Germany could not happen here, let me tell you something. It's been happening here. I know you thought I was about to say, oh, you got another thing coming, it can happen. It's been happening here. We've had neo-Nazis and white supremacists in the pigs. You don't think Jim Crow Biden is a white supremacist? Mr. Some of my best friends are segregationists. Get the fuck out of here. We've lived under fascism in this country as colonized people in a domestic colony since we've been here. We have lived with this fascism forever. We've been trying to tell you that's what this government is, but you didn't want to hear it. You know why? Because they didn't wear swastikas. Because they didn't look like the movie Nazis. Ask our indigenous brothers and sisters about fascism. What the hell do you think that was at Standing Rock? What the fuck do you think the Indian Removal Act was? That's fascism. That's what it looks like. And we have been living it. We've been trying to tell you. So that's why a lot of us black radicals, us hardcore leftists, and especially black radicals, we're not impressed with y'all in your little candlelight vigils. And that's why you piss us off, because we really want to know, where the fuck were you when everybody else was getting slaughtered by the fascists? Oh, those people weren't fascists because they were Democrats. And they're materially different from the Republicans. Oh, yeah? Joe Biden is apparently having his presidential moment, completely lying about a coup and a civil war that he and the black guy who was president funded and fomented in Ukraine, that Biden was always planned to be the caretaker of. It was going to be Biden or somebody else they chose to see this plan through to where we are right now. You tell me how the Democrats are any fucking different from the Republicans or the Nazis. I said what I said, and I said a lot of it, and I appreciate y'all sticking with me. I really do. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you learned something. I hope questions were answered. If you have questions, I hope it's information that you can use. I am going to go get myself a glass of wine. Me and Brewski gonna have our Chinese food. He's gonna have a little bit of plain rice with plain chicken, and I'm gonna have I had some dumplings, and I'm gonna have a little bit of Happy Family and some lo mein. And I'm going to throw all these links up there in the video description for you, so you can read all this stuff, share all this information. What do I want you to do? I want you to join an organization. I want you to join an anti-imperialist, radical left organization. You don't want to call yourself a socialist? Okay, fine. That's your personal thing. Me? Yes. But you need to join an organization, because I learned half, probably not even half. I learned maybe 60% of what I know from being in an organization. And the other 40% of what I know, I learned being the co-host By Any Means Necessary and talking to people who, guess what, are in organization. So, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope this was clear. I hope it made sense. And I hope you're willing to fight. Because now we are really going to see who is on the right side of the fucking barricades. And I'm here to tell you, if you're not on the anti-imperialist side, you are my enemy. End of story. Thanks for tuning in to Lukman Nation tonight, y'all. I appreciate you. As always, like, share, all that kind of stuff. And I will see you hopefully next week, or maybe sooner. Who the hell knows? I don't know. But anyway, peace, y'all. Be really, really good to each other. Be good to yourselves, and peace if you're willing to fight for it, because we've got to fight for it. Good night. And they are out here throwing up the peace sign like they won something. Yep. I don't understand what they think they want.
I need to revise. I did see white people this happy. You know, I gave the example of America and the Allies' defeat over Nazi Germany. But I haven't seen this many white people happy. There was a couple periods in history. One was when Nutella was introduced. And I mean, I haven't seen that many white people happy since Nutella was introduced and marketed and stuff. Because white people love Nutella.
They booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for their prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. Boarded that flight to Amsterdam. When my accountant and minus my family found out too and didn't like it. You're not in this alone. What Dale said and I thought he was biased. Then I got a Venmo that said copy the finest. Before my foolishness settled in. Recorded a whole tape before we got to Berlin. This close to giving up and now never again. Don't overlook the work and come expecting to win. In the end, my word, never put nothing over the squad. Got it right up under their nose and provide a facade. Off the cliff with broken wings, I'm aware of the odds. Enough faith for us all, I'm the one for the job. Most days, catching sun rays, baby, look like the front page. Overthinking what they might say, have it your way. Yeah, the biggest threat is something they never seen. Dial it up, patch me into the screen. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up.